Let's get started. So we won't be doing the community challenge. I'll just do some 14-day challenge graduates and talk about color in illustrations, which is really a very touched topic. Okay, so wow, amazing job, right? Let's take a look at this. Look at the difference. This is what I mean when you have clunky art, beginner looking stiffness. You've got eyelids that are kind of overly chonked, and then you've got this excessive presence in these overly sculpted eye sockets. You know, if you were using Loomis or Hogarth, or if you were using Asaro heads, you end up with this overly defined blocking that you didn't have the instinct to remove. But you kept going and you started removing them. But do you see what I mean? You guys have really, really clunky art, and you're wondering why. Oh, I should stop using these. I should stop using these tutorials. They're making my art look weird. I'm shifting from anime into realism. Realism looks gross. Drawing on realism makes anime look overly American art. So it's called American art. And this is what we would call American art, quote unquote, right? And the only reason why it looks like it's American is because it looks like it's a 70s or 60s model in a drawing or some kind of ad that they used to draw ads. Real amazing artists used to draw ads, but they had that very, very specific American look back in the 60s, 70s, 40s, 50s. And this is what it looks like. It has that look, this kind of over-present bounce light, this almost lined in Terminator line, a little bit of overly clunkiness. You can't tell if it's a woman or a man all that well, and then it looks like it's a gray movie. It looks like it's a black and white movie with those olden day actresses and their excessive eyebrow makeup so that their eyebrows come through all that extra exposure in the camera, or whatever the term is. So you're kind of getting a little bit of that tutorial stiffness. But we move into this, it's a lot more modernized. It's you got some issues still, definitely. So this could be someone's day 1, but this is your day 14, and what we care about is the comparison between here and here. Alright, so let me see if I can do a quick before and after, because they matter. Befores and afters matter. And let me see if I can overlay. Let's see, you can see how different the faces are from each other. Now it is the same artist, but we've got such an advanced change in the way they drew. So what are some of the biggest changes that we're seeing? So the eyes now look forward. There's a little bit of down tilt perspective on the head. The ears are out of place, definitely, but we can discuss that. The lower eyelid isn't overly defined. The cast shadow is a little bit more natural around the nose. You have present cylinders in the mouth instead of overly drawn or overly outlined. The neck isn't so overly structured, and then it doesn't really look feminine anymore, but the eyes are large enough to read as female. And so that way you get a gender androgyny, you get that overlap, and then you get that awkwardness when you have the wrong kind of androgyny, which is just bad drawing, not really more about gender. Okay, and then the contrast is less excessive. There's less difference between the brights and the shadows. That's what contrast means. Contrast means the difference between the brights and the darks. Write that back to me. And it could be slight lights and slight dark grays. It's just about the difference between the two. Alright, congratulations on this. You did wonderfully. I recommend you keep going. I want this to be your day 1 next time, and then whatever is coming up next will be your day 14. And understand that the better you get, the harder it is to improve. And when you keep drawing, you're going to have to look into the details, and what I'll be looking at today are the details for my critique. So what are some issues I have with this piece? You have a couple of issues with the proportion. So the head feels a little bit bulbous. But before I get to that, a head in perspective looking forward, even if it's a slight tilt, sits in between the eyes and nose line. Okay, and then we're making sure that either side is symmetrical. And we can see the jawline. Also making sure not to indent randomly across. And we're zooming all the way out to see the problem with the head, and that's that it's just too large on either side. And then we need a little bit of length to it instead of width. Okay, I'm also making sure the eyebrow arc is inside the temples. It's not outside of the temples. So lowering density a little. And then making sure the tail of the eyebrow is also within the eye socket. The eyebrow should sit around the parameters of the eye socket. Write that back to me. And by the way, in case you guys forgot, I reward my brushes, my entire brush set or singular brushes if you have some, for good note takers. Okay, and then I can't tell if this is in the before or after, but yeah, it's in the before as well. You have these corners in the eyes which are not acceptable. They're not acceptable. Alright, so we're going here and we're tucking these in. Unless she's having a sag of the eyelids, and unless they're moving down over the eye like a hood. And if that was the case, we would have less upper eyelid space, then smooth out the eye. Another problem you have with the eyes, and I'm just going to try to focus on the eyes, is the crease strength. The crease strength of the edge of the crease is only strongest where the eyebrow collapses on top of the eyeball. Everywhere else, the eyeball moves back in. It becomes recessed. It goes back inside the skull. So recall a couple classes ago when I built that model in Portrait Studio of the eye and the eyelid. This end and this end of the ball go back inside the skull, so they don't stick out enough to create enough of a crease. And they move away. Blending out the eyebrows as well. And if you don't know how to render the eyebrows, give us a bold value than these kind of just floating values or these random misaligned texture brush strokes for the hair. It's not reading. So give us a solid value, or just don't bother and don't bother texturing it, or just texture it properly. Another problem you have is if the sphere was floating in space. So let's open up a simple marquee tool and make an oval, which is essentially the head in space, and use the same mid-tone that you started off with. And we're drawing on it. We're also going to get our shadow color, and we're going to radially apply value on that shadow according to a top-down light source at 45-degree angles from the top. We don't use any neighboring values, not this value up here, not this value up here. So let's use this halfway value up here, too dark. Even this is too dark up here. This has its own realm of values. This does not share values with anything else. Like this line up. This line down is all rejection of the light source, but rejection of the light source can start all the way up here. What we do on a face is that we know that there's two extra bulbs growing on outer side of the face, and they are the cheekbones, and they are at the skeletal level. So these are extremely important extra elevations we add on top that are dense, that are made of bone. It's not cartilage, or might change from person to person, unless it's deliberately bad bone structure and your character, well, for a trope, every character you have will have cheekbones. Alright, some way or another. Either if they're chunky and they have a big face, like Jasmine's dad, then you'll have big cheekbones that are kind of more fat and big spheres. But this halfway line of the cheekbones down is where the shadows start. And we're taking this, and now I'm going to apply the radial value in highlight. And that is also climbing up, and we're just making this little egg. Alright, and no values are shared between here and here. So why are there values that belong below the cheekbone and into the shadow up here on your day 14? You should even out all value sharing by day 14. And this is why I mean the fundamentals are simple. They're ridiculously simple. We just drew an egg, and that's just helped us figure out one of the biggest problems you have in here that you couldn't see by yourself. But it is also a major fundamental that should be taken seriously. It's not just simple. And making sure the entire head is a completely different planet than the lower half of the head. The cranium is completely different. And I'm also making sure that none of these values here are sharing. So the temple has its own value, which is from the eyebrow arc up. So we block that in. And you guys always forget about this dude. And this all gets blended back because it's a female. And this down is completely different from cheekbone down. And sometimes cheekbone has its own little dedicated cast shadow. So technically, only the cheekbone would get that little extra bit of shadow on either side, because it's creating something of a cast shadow off itself onto the rest of the lower half of the face. So now you have less of that actual beard look. It actually looks less like pigment. And I'm just evening this whole beard out. And if you don't know where to start your beard shadow, it's just on the corners of the mouth. The top of the mouth, using that temple value, kind of obviously a little bit lighter because the snout of the face looks back up at the light. That would be the value that stops the beard shadow. Alright, and so now that we've defined the ears, we can see where the face stops. And this is excessive contouring around the mouth. I mean around the cheeks. I wouldn't really use this much. Alright, so for all you note takers, what I want to see is this map that I'm going to draw upcoming. I'm going to draw a big X wherever I use a large blending brush. Whenever I'm smudging big brush strokes, I'm going to use a big X. Whenever I'm using a small blending brush, so my smudge brush plus my smudge brushes, the number 4, I'm using coupled together to smudge and distribute values. One of the biggest smudge brushes that you can use is on the cheeks, because the cheeks are bodies of fat. Very similar size to the forehead, though not as big because the forehead is bone, so you want to preserve some value shift. But this you can pretty much even out. When it comes to the eyes, it's almost little to no smudge. I'm not even going to put X's on the eyes. I'm going to put a small X over here. What does a large smudge brush do if used on the wrong spot? Does anyone know the answer to this question? What does a large smudge brush do when used in the wrong way? And I'm just going to wait for the answer. And I'm going to continue smudging a little bit using my indicators here. These are all the areas I'm always smudging, but as you can see, I'm being very particular about the size of smudge brush that I'm using. My brushes can't be used with Procreate. I attempted it for a whole month. I attempted transferring my brushes over into mobile apps, which I think I need to make a whole new set of brushes for and buy these mobile apps or buy an iPad or do whatever, and just work with making a new set of brushes for you guys. But no, as far as as I know, you can buy them and use the templates, I think, to make your own brushes on Procreate. But when it comes to how I might send that out, I would need to get my own iPad and export it, I believe. But Krita, they don't transfer, and Paint-O-Sai, I don't think it has custom brushes. Okay, what is the answer? Mix values and make wrong value sharing. Excellent. That's one hazard of using the largest, a size brush of smudge too large for an area. Losing the edge. You lose the edge if you smudge too much. Yeah, Clip Studio Paint as a Clip Studio Paint clip. I don't know what it's called. Also, my brushes don't transfer into that. So essentially, what it does, the correct answer. Let's use the cheek size smudge brush and use it on the eyes. It erases. It's an eraser. Right, this is just one brush stroke. My computer's just rendering it right now because it's a massive file. Alright, so that's what happens, and that's what you don't do. A large smudge brush used in the wrong area is an eraser. You're supposed to be changing the size. So I'm going to leave these X's in place, and I'm going to blend. The brush is, and this is not me using the X to the size of the brush. This is just me making the X in reference to the size that I feel like I need. But out of that size, I'm also referencing the drop for every other place. And I can use as many brush strokes as I want. The smudge brush doesn't leave a trail, so I don't have to worry about brush efficiency with a smudge brush. Okay, so I didn't block everywhere else, so now I just have to go back and block everywhere else just to make sure we're blocking. A little bit of value sharing on the nose. I'm going to flip the canvas by pressing Shift and R, or just rotating the canvas, sorry, and give the nose bridge a little bit more width. Alright, because you can't really have the look of an adult nose that hasn't been tampered with too much plastic-wise or surgery-wise. You can't have a nice nose that is too thin. It's a very particular trope we're working with here when we make a nose that's too thin. Usually sly characters, foxy characters, not foxy in that they're sexy, foxy in that they're tricky. We give them a long nose, and then we go back to casting and see how that's used in movies. I'm using the same rotate function I discussed last time, and I'm just going to use the other side. Making sure the nose has its own parameters. And I feel like after edging this in, I feel like the nose really doesn't need all that value on either side of it. You really overdid it, and you didn't need all that much. And I'm getting a darken mode and just getting rid of any extra bounce light you have on the halfway of the nostril out. And then finally we need to complete this blocking. So you had this line of excessive edge socket on all the way down toward the outer corner. What you need to do is make sure that by using the blocking brush, and this blocking brush comes in my sketching set, we're already defining where that eyelid ends, right? In this area we do blend out, so 2 X's here as well. And we blend that out. I don't encourage for your 14-day challenge to use a drop shadow over the eye socket. It's kind of an excessive shadow. Get rid of it. Use something a little bit more photo-friendly. Alright, and so where else did I smudge? I smudged to marry the eyebrow texture back in with the face. We don't want floating eyebrows over everything. And a little bit at the front as well, at the start where we have those little wispy bits. A little bit over here. And over here. Alright, obviously now we have to add new X's for the nose since I reblocked it. And please blend out the blocks of the nose. You're still dealing with that kind of over confident, no, not the word confident. This excessive trust you give to these art books you've used in the past that don't blend their blocks once they're done. Blocks are there for blending. Please blend all your blocks. Okay. So it's a mystery for a lot of beginners how to blend, and it's why I focus a lot on it when I can. They just kind of overdo it when it's time. The nose shouldn't have this under, like its own little, you know, the face should move right back in with the nose and reconnect at the top. So you definitely had a blending problem. Nostrils could be a little bit larger. One thing you could have done a little bit more of is exaggerate the cylindrical shape of the mouth. So this cast shadow off the upper lip on the lower lip has kind of canceled out the shape of the lower lip. So I'm bringing in just a little bit of extra top half cylinder light. So every lip is a cylinder. The lower lip is a cylinder. I'm bringing in the top light half of the cylinder right now. Oh, I've got a terrible migraine. I have to drink more water. A little bit over here. And then same thing for the upper lip, just a small degree because the upper lip is a little bit darker by nature. Alright, and then of course there's the fact that the mouth is, I mean, your before radial shading was probably better than your after, but I could be just like looking at my own paint over. But I'm going to work on it just a little bit longer. Your cast shadow here on the eyes is just much too much. Please take it easy with that. And I'm going to just complete the shape of the eyebrow and make sure that the eyebrow is not bright past the temple line. You didn't have a temple line to show you where you were doing, what you were doing wrong, right? You didn't have a temple line, so I'm bringing the highlights in only on the inside. I'm going to blend and correct the dome shape of the eyebrow bone. Sorry about the fan in the background. It's super hot here. And I'm going to grab this temple value that we found earlier and brush it with darken right into the eye socket. And again, we're blending out. And we're just getting this really kind of like incessant, blocky look to the eyelid dome, and the eyelid should be a perfect dome. If you haven't watched that video that I've made, please go watch it. Okay, and then filter, liquify, and I'm just going to fix that edginess everywhere. It's got to be a perfect dome or else it's not going to work. Ooh, it's so hot. I don't have the AC on. Okay. Okay, really. And I'm just throwing this. Alright, tablet completely lagged. Okay. And then there are only so many areas of the face that you can bring in black in, but one of the most important areas is the eye socket. And there's a pretty kind of averaged look to the eye socket right now, which is not acceptable because the average of contour, there is no average, because sometimes you get completely overshadowed areas and you have bone on eyeball or dense on dense, and sometimes you have areas that are padded with fat in the eyebrows. So there is no average there. So there should be no average in value. Okay, and then you've got some more eye shape problems. So you've got no outer corner. You still have some of these little blocks left over. These little corners in the anatomy, which is much easier to fix with Liquify, honestly. Can't just spit in the face of innovation. We would if it was Wacom though. And then we're tucking this in. And then finally, I'm going to try to focus the eyes. And then we blend, blend, blend. For the lower area, wherever there is fat, we blend. Write that back to me. That's a lot on the face. That's a lot of blending ahead of you. And that's a lot of blending you're ignoring. The face is it's an organic structure. It's got a lot of fat. So that's a lot of areas you're leaving messy. And in your 14-day challenge, you're supposed to go for clean. This is you training to work for someone one day. This is you perfecting your character design. Portraits are the backbone of any portfolio, and you're teaching yourself what exactly if you're not blending appropriately. You're teaching yourself to be dirty and messy and bad courtesy or presentation. So make sure that you're blending for polish, right? You're rendering. What is rendering if not to make things look realistic or to push the presentation? So I'm getting rid of any extreme cast shadows. And for the cast shadow of the eyes to be at this level, so let's open up Portrait Studio. When the eye cast shadow of the nose reaches the lips or past the lips, that's when we start getting the eye cast shadow of the, like an eye socket shadow on top of the eyeball. When it is at the halfway point, which is what you drew, the halfway point, we don't have that cast shadow. So it's a particular kind of eye that you're doing. So look at that. At the lips or past is when the mouth starts to, or when the eyes start getting their cast shadow. So you gave us something like that. The lips is the nose is at the nose cast shadow is at the lips. You gave us this halfway cast shadow like this. The eye sockets don't get that cast shadow yet. Look at that. Look at the arrow. Look at what the arrow is doing. So this is directly above. The bulb is directly above their head, and this is at a 45-degree angle. Very, very nice for character design, seeing more of the face, etc. So you had a cast shadow discrepancy. You weren't coming from the same light source. A different light source was on the eyes, and there was a different light source on the nose. Not acceptable. That's failing. That's something I would fail if I graded, and grades are dumb. Grades are stupid. The only thing a grade reveals is how bad the teacher is. Anyway, so I'm just getting rid of that cast shadow, and I'm getting my contrast back around the eyes, and I'm bringing that whiteness back a little bit. Wake the eyes up. Alright, so a bit more whiteness on the eyes. They look less bloodshot. I might even bring in some more. Okay. So lots of jumps we've made today, but you can see there's so many more that we can do together. There's the inner and outer corners of the eye. So I'm just working with the beauty you chose, but 14-day challenge doesn't mean you have to find like the beauty each time. You can have a bit more of a distinguished face. You can make the nose a bit larger than this. You can bring the eyes closer in together. She'll look more human. You don't have to always oversize the pupils. You don't always have to give her the perfect arc in her eyebrow. But, but obviously we do have to show that we can draw a beautiful character when needed, especially if you're looking for employment. And then finally I'm going to, for the nose at least, I say finally a lot. Low opacity, high color And I'm radially applying the darkest, darkest dark. And I'm deleting with my blocking brush around the edge of the nostril. I'd rather a perfect radial shade eyedrop shape for the nostril than bounce light. I could care less about bounce light. Bounce light does not make your work look better. The fundamentals do. Write that back to me. Bounce light does not make your work look better. And it's always weird having a large nostril thickness, but not, and a small nostril hole. It looks like the nose is swollen when we do that. So let me close Portrait Studio. By the way, guys, Portrait Studio is still on sale. It's at 50% off. It's still on sale until the end of June. So if you guys don't have it yet, I've extended the sale for you. There's really no harm in extending the sale, I've discovered, as long as you guys, get this tool and use it as you need to. It's an educational tool. It's a learning tool. It's a drafting tool. Teaching and learning, and studying tool, and it's good for helping you build entire scenes. So if you guys want to hop over to my store and buy it, it's on sale. If a mod can please provide the link for the audience. And I'm blending around the nose a little bit more. And then I'll add the bounce light, but really I'm just using like the most average mid-tone. I'm not using a white. I don't want to interrupt the core shadow I've been building for the last 4 hours of the painting process. It's just a very thick brush and it's hardly present. And I'm still going to blend it. But look at how tiny my smudging brush is, which is also my blending brush. And I'm continuing this. The more grays you have, the more information you have. Write that back to me. And we can blend this area of the eye socket out. Seam this back in. And I'm just going to clean the outer portion here of the face. Let the ears finish off into a lobe right at the nose line. Drag down towards the jawline from the ears at a slant for females, straight down for males, and then slant back in for the neck. And the nose, and the neck area really shouldn't be that dark, so I'm just going to choose a bit of a lighter, friendlier value. Moving down. Just closing off the neck. Careful with that neck length. You may think it's just placeholder and harmless, but it might invite you to draw really long necks. So any questions about this paint over, any at all, about any step before I jump into the lighting study and the color study? Is the artist here with us today for this piece? Let me clean this whole thing. Nobody really pays attention to the neck. You could, by all means, put the exact wrong degree of the cast shadow. As long as it's cylindrical, nobody will be the wiser. Okay, so some things I want to correct. So I'm grabbing, sorry, I just had to adjust my monitor. I'm grabbing some darker values and kind of creating the haze of texture since I don't want to texture the eyebrows. I'm not there yet with the detail. I'm going to just bring in some lower eyelid core shadow that kind of almost melts in with the eye whites. I'm gonna, with a large brush, cast the shadow off the lashes on the whites. Excuse me. I'm gonna get pure white and bring it in wherever we have wet pockets around the face. So wherever we have sheen, wetness, shimmer, especially on females, we have that glistening. On the nose, it's very oily. Right here on the inner crest of the nose and then the outer tip. We sometimes have a bit of wetness on the sides. The more grays you have, the more information. Excellent. Bounce light does not make your work better. Fundamentals do. Your vote matters. And I'm blending out. A little bit of extra wetness on either side of the mouth. We all drool, especially when looking at a handsome boy. Okay, wow, that sucked. I'm too tired to really go for that grunty laugh right now. Awkward teacher signing out. And then we have a little bit of shape on the mouth, and let's take a look at the before and after. Okay. Oh, no, Istebrak. I need to clean this little mess up. So on either side, we've got this sharpness that's just necessary for the read, right? And then we've got flatten, select all. It's just so pretty. Before, see that bulb shape on the in the cranium on the head? After. Before. Moist, exactly. More grays you have. Where there is water or oil, exactly, Atelier. So I used the soft brush. You saw how I applied that from a zoom out. So this is where I expect and better to be your next 14-day challenge. And be careful with using reference. Okay, there's a lot more to do. There is definitely. But I'd like to focus on, where you were, where you improved on, so it's still massive improvement between the two, and where you're headed from here, from today. How does one make select loop invisible? Control H. Sorry, I just needed some water. Okay, so flatten. Let's move on. Congratulations on your 14-day challenge graduation. Please continue on with your work. It teaches you fundamentals of discipline and workflow and being able to finish your work and having better work ethics. So congratulations on developing those wonderful habits. Let's talk about Naked Senorita here. We have really, really bad use with color. And it's bad for one big reason. It's not subtle. Color in an environment is subtle. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting my desaturation, and I'm desaturating red everywhere there is shadow. Because where is that shadowed red getting all that color from, I wonder? Is it using alchemy? Is it breaking the laws of physics? That's not possible. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm desaturating wherever we have no direct light. Is this even working? Yep. Is this on? And I'm desaturating anywhere where there is no color. This comes for skin. I mean, I painted over this and I showed you exactly where the stomach shadows go, and you still did it wrong. And then I'm going to saturate where we do have color on that red. The red should be the only saturation you have in this entire scene. For one big reason. Yellow is bright, and yellow means lack of gray. Gray means saturation, so yellow in light must mean white. And look at how white her breast is. More white in a scene on yellow hair means more white in the hair. More light in a scene. So we're technically only really seeing yellow in the midtones, and those are right here in the little thickest areas of hair. Okay, and then you brought in none of that white on the cape. None of it. Give it a Canadian passport because there was none of it there. Stupid, so stupid. Right, so I'm using some of that white that we have on the hair, we have on the breasts, and we're using that everywhere. Okay, so there are shading problems here, which I can't look at. And I want to be able to give you as big of a critique hour as we did last time when we looked at this. So I'm going to try, but it's a lot of mistakes here, both on the grayscales and in the, in the colors. So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out my thing here. So we're going to use color mode. And I'm just finding all of these midtones and applying the value on top. We also want to darken, but while maintaining saturation, because the stomach area is way too, like, look at where your midtone was. It was down here. I've just moved up. So you were way too close to those grays. And I'm just going to use a normal brush here and just bring in some midtones everywhere. Midtones are information. Look at how we had no information everywhere else. So your technique is bad because you're not applying color properly. Your shadows are in the wrong place. The whole stomach area should typically be in shadow. And then the only relief we get is from the belly button out. So you had really no reason to bring in shadow in there, or light in there, on the entire area, because it kind of made her stomach look floopy. And it's from the rib cage to the stomach, and then from the belly button out into the light, which you got wrong. Oh, sorry, I just lost pin pressure there. Okay, so a little bit more like that, and we're gonna zoom out and clean up all this floopiness, which happens in women, especially after pregnancy, skin stretches, but I don't know if that's what you were going for. And then we kind of get that brightness for the pubic area, moving up only with lights. We don't do this part with shadows, because then we're just gonna make her look floopy again. Her hip bones will catch some light, and I'm only starting with the stomach area because the chest area will get way more light than this, so I want to know how dark I should go first. And then I'm cleaning that up. So I had to even out the midtones before I did any of this. And not just that, you have some pretty messy fuzzes here. So just, you know, give us that clean cut. That's part of rendering. Sharp edges are part of rendering. When you don't have sharp edges, you don't have a well-rendered piece. You need these sharp edges. They don't just disappear. Okay, and the stomach needs a bit more detail. I'm not there yet. And then I'm trying to clean up everywhere else. And then I need to clean up this gray skin we have because of the saturation. And I'm giving the skin all one collective value, just monochromatic, just until I decide where I will have these shades. And I'm going to get a completely different value. By the way, your color temperature is different for every color. So for the reds, you have more orange, and for the yellows, you have this like really saturated gold texture, which doesn't make any sense. So if you want us to have this glowing, so before I get into, I'm going to just bring in that glow you did go for. If I raise the hair into white, I have to desaturate the hair. Alright? You also have this law-breaking brightness on the lower part of the hair, which makes no sense. Shouldn't be catching any light. Alright. And then I'm just using Dodge Tool to create that fiery glow at the top. That fiery glow will be in everything as well. It'll be on the breasts. It'll be up here. It'll be a bit there. There's just going to be that drowning downward light everywhere else if you're getting the hair up into that color. We just have to make sure everything's sitting on the same level. Not just the body, but also the cape. So it's like the cape you drew had just no involvement in anything else. If I was, you know, showing off this flawless skin is really very bare. It doesn't have much going on. So I would work on making the skin as little saturated as possible in the midtones and just carry some of those accents of red from the cape back into the skin, and then you have a really nice believable skin tone. So some of these areas include, so I'm going to just shift this over into red because we're getting closer. And these would be typically the values I choose before I start bringing in those fiery burning kind of lights. I don't think this dye would get all that much. And then I'm just going to desaturate a lot around this cape, like a lot. And I'm going to try to push the levels down because that black in the cape should be pretty desaturated. And then you have this black everywhere else, which isn't making much sense. Then I'm going to bring this value, this white value, on top of everything. And that's the magnitude of the light source falling on top of just everything. And I'm sorry about the soft brush glare to it, but it's typically what's happening. And the light being above means that we're going to get cast shadows. Big ones. Okay, we're going to get long cast shadows off the breasts. And then we're going to get the cast shadow of the torso on top. So really you are actually in a 45-degree angle with your new light source. So you're having consistent light source issues all around. And this needs to take the shape of the rib cage. Alright, and then it's the temperature of like the hair itself that's not making much sense. It's not a very well lit room, so why is the yellows of the hair so golden? Why is it so incredibly gold and orange? It's a very pale white we have. And then the skin tone all around I would adjust to be a little bit more pale. And we only have saturation on the areas of midtone in between shadow and highlight. Okay, so it's a lot of stuff to correct, and it's a lot of stuff I can't correct at the moment. So you've got shadows that you're missing, I'll delete that. You've got the highlights, I'll duplicate that to match, and then that needs to be cleaned up after duplicating. I think this is all a bit too much for you to handle right now, since not only do you have color problems, you have shading problems still. You don't know what light source you want to stick with. You can't seem to stick with a light source when you choose one. Right? Find one, stick to it. And then there's I'm just gonna find an average shadow color for the whole scene, and I'm gonna use it to cast a shadow over the eye socket. You showed way too much of the face, but the light's coming from above. Like, we're seeing this consistently. You cannot keep a cast shadow down. I wonder why this is happening. You need to be able to decide on a cast shadow and stick to it. Also, the features are very masculine, and not the kind of features we would give a face, you know, that we're trying to show as the femme fatale, or trying to show as the sexy goddess, or the Aphrodite. So you were missing hair, cast shadow. The hair was glowing that you were drawing, and then I'm just going to saturate along the midtones, which is the only acceptable area to saturate on yellow hair with top-down light. And I'm working zoomed out because I cannot clean these details for you at the moment. And then I'm going to catch the rest of the body up using Dodge Tool with the rest of what's happening on the hair. So I kept some of her original body shape. And then I just want to remind you that the lower half is not going to be as bright as the upper half since it's inside. And then we have a pretty bad crop. And I just want to level the skin tone color with the rest of the yellows. I think just this whole thing is just a little bit more yellow because we were working a little too closely with the skin tone pink being pink, and that was the same color as the red of the dress. And then, like, I really want to allow that black to exist, but I have to follow the light environment, and I have to follow the light environment, but I don't want to. I'd rather not. That bounce, that light that comes from above, I'm going to use it on soft light. That drowns over everything. Okay, so it kind of glows over everything. And then finally, we're going to bring in the saturation tool once again, which is sponge on saturate. And then we'll saturate wherever the light reveals the character. You have no cast shadows coming off the cape on top of the breasts. Which is important. Top drop light. And then I'm going to just reestablish some coarse shadows. And this is just working from a zoom out. Like, I want to saturate everything as well in one fell swoop, and I want to move everything together toward, so it makes a little bit more sense. Or we just desaturate. It's really up to what kind of story you're trying to tell. The inside of this hair here is saturated. And there is subsurface scattering in Portrait Studio that you can emulate in the upcoming fabric folds. And hair is very similar to fabric. Yeah, me too. I hate the overexposed style, but you're right, it is good for the mystery. As for the exact magnitude of your like light, your spotlight, it doesn't have to be that clear cut inside. You can make it a little bit more soft. And there's always the bloom back. But of all the light sources you're studying, you really chose the most difficult one. And I don't recommend it. You can saturate the shadows a little bit more in the shadow. You also didn't capture a lot of the major areas of core shadow everywhere else. So you, again, have no business studying this in color right now. I know you're having fun, but you want to know what would be more fun? In 6 months when you can actually use a core shadow. That would be more fun. When you stop having core shadow problems in your work. You know, sometimes people ask me, Istebrak, what's your birthday wish? And I'd be like, I just want to walk again. You know, I want to walk without being in pain. It's the same thing for you. Right now, you can't walk. You have no core shadow knowledge. So your wish, your only wish when you're doing art, your only concern, fun, you know, for me, it would be fun for me to be able to walk again properly. I'd have fun. For me, fun is just being healthy. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? So for you, I know you want to have fun, and I know a lot of you want to have fun, but stop trying to have fun because it's making you not see where you're, what really is very, very valuable in your work. It's what is of value. Having fun should be making a good core shadow and knowing how to work with your reference. That should be the only fun you dream about. Okay? I don't mean to make this about my health. I'm trying to work from whatever examples I have in my life about what fun is. Sometimes I want to have fun and I want to go to the gym and have fun, yay, and then I ruin my injury again. Fun is being able to walk. Fun is not being in pain, right? Same thing with you. You're in pain right now. You don't know how to work with your core shadows. You're showing all kinds of symptoms and you really need to stop that. This whole chest, breast area, we're just going to treat them as beige colored water balloons. And we're applying the value there. But we also need to bring in a lot of bounce light around breasts because they just don't reject light uniformly. They're actually pretty rounded and they're kind of see-through. So you can bring in like the slightest little bit of subsurface. I mean, they're not actually see-through translucent, but you can bring in quite a bit and get away with it. But do you guys know what I mean when I say your fun should be core shadows? That should be the fun. I know you're trying to do cool studies that are more entertaining and work with references you find appealing. But I'd revisit these anyway if I was a pro, so why try them now? Do the form studies now that mean something, that change your work, that make you a better artist and fix your eye vision problem, that you're not seeing your core shadows where you should be. Sponge tool, saturate, large size, and I'm using it on the mid-tones of the breasts. Sometimes breasts are desaturated because the skin is stretched out so they look a bit green. But this is only for paler girls. Alright, so I think that's enough boobies, talk about boobies. Alright, so everyone, let's take a look at, does anyone have any questions? Before? See that face thing you were doing there? That looked like a man. After we've evened out the values of the skin tone a little bit more, I would raise that belly button up as well. It's a little bit low. But at least now we have an acceptable color in the hair, but I'd keep working. But look at that yellow you were using. These are elementary colors. These are crayon primary colors that you give a child so that they know what red is and blue is. You can tell the difference between cool red and orangey red. Orange yellow and green yellow. You're at the point where you can tell that. And if you have that overexposed white, you can tell she's blonde and you brought in some saturation. But I really need you to stop focusing on the fun part and make the new fun thing working in grayscale or studying one colored section at a time, okay? Not many colored sections at a time. One colored section at a time. So study hair in top-down lighting before you recombine it all into one big illustration. You can do it. Just work with it in pieces. What do we do when we're learning mechanics? What do we do when we're looking computer sciences? We learn one component at a time and later combine them back together. When we're making a fridge, we learn what a radiator is. We learn what other components that I don't know are. And then we later combine them together and make a whole fridge. But we can't study a fridge in its entirety, all right? So break this fridge down into parts and readdress it. All right, thank you everyone for coming today. I really appreciate you coming into the live classes. If you want to upload your work for critique, go to istebrak.com and click on the little Reddit icon to join. Please join. There will be another upcoming community challenge very, very soon. It's going to be a character design community challenge. It's going to be hella fun. I cannot wait for you guys to do it, and I can't wait to see what you guys make. It's the current Patreon challenge. If anyone wants to do this challenge early, join as a Patreon as an apprentice. And you'll be able to join this challenge early and attend the critique hour for that day. If you want Portrait Studio, go to the store icon. Currently it's at $45. It's going to be $90 by the end of June. Thank you everyone who's purchased it. Thank you to everyone who has supported us and continues to support me through my products and through Patreon. You guys are the best. And that's it. Thank you guys for coming. I'll see you guys on Thursday for the community challenge due date for the action scene, the zombie inferi attacking the escapee action scene. I'll speak to you guys very soon. Bye.